Welcome to the YouTube channel for my new book, Seed of Israel, DNA Guide to Tracing Your Jewish Ancestry, available now on Amazon in eBook and paperback versions. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button below to get more videos like this on the Seed of Israel YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to introduce a new DNA Ancestry tool that you can download and that provides some interesting results in terms of calculating your ethnicity. I'm then going to break down my results that show the Levantine origins of Ashkenazi Jews, but also our genetic closeness with Southern Europeans and in particular Greeks and Italians. I'm then going to discuss historical evidence of Mizrahi Jews from Babylon, Israel, and Syria who settled in Europe during the Middle Ages and who taught the Ashkenazi Jews and other Western diaspora Jews the Talmud, the oral laws, which they were unfamiliar with. They were only familiar with the Septuagint, which was the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and because Western diaspora Jews are the descendants of Greek-speaking Jews who later were Latin-speaking Jews, and who later in the Middle Ages became the Ashkenazi about 900 years ago and developed Yiddish. So let me just talk a little bit about DNA Genics, Admixture Studio. So DNA Genics recently released a new beta version of their Ancestry application that runs several admixture calculators. All you need to do is to download the Admixture Studio. I provide a link below. You download that to your computer desktop and then choose the calculator. Your raw DNA file, you have to have your raw DNA file downloaded as well, which if you took the DNA test through, for example, Ancestry DNA or 23andMe or Family Tree DNA, I believe there's a couple others, you can, there should be instructions on how to download or get emailed your raw DNA file, which then you can download, and then and when you run it, you'll run that with the calculator, with the Admixture Studio calculator. So there's instructions on how to do that in the link I provide below to the DNA Genics Admixture Studio. So then you decide what the speed you want to run the calculator. You can run it from slow to normal to fast. The speeds associate with the accuracy of the results. So the problem is that normal mode can take a very long time to process, especially the calculators with more reference populations and oracles. So while it is tempting to take the shortcut and run the fast mode, the results can be dramatically different depending on the calculator. So I would recommend running the calculators in normal mode, which is the way that the authors of the calculators intended it to run. And so that I would run in normal mode even if it takes all day and night, or even perhaps all weekend, because your results will be more accurate. So you might get like, again, it's tempting to run it in fast mode, but the results might be a little bit skewed. The populations might be a bit skewed. So I wouldn't rely on fast mode, although you can do it and just see what the results are, but I think normal mode is going to be more accurate. So you can, and also remember, you can run the different calculators at once to save time. So you just open the application, Admixture Studio, from the icon from your desktop, 2 or 3 times, and then just run the calculators at the same time. So now I'm just going to go briefly over my results. I'm going to point out how my results using the new Tolan, T-O-L-A-N, admixture calculators show how Ashkenazi Jews, and now I'm 100% Ashkenazi or European Jewish, according to the most recent Ancestry DNA update from this past September, which added 13,000 more reference populations for a total of 16,000 reference populations. So I'm pretty sure that is the most accurate ethnicity estimate out of the DNA major commercial genealogy companies. That's a lot of reference populations, and a lot of Ashkenazi Jews went up from, I was, for example, 91% Ashkenazi Jewish or European Jewish, and I went up to 100% European Jewish or Ashkenazi. And I believe that that's what happened to most fully Ashkenazi Jews. With as myself, I have at least 4 Eastern European Jewish grandparents. So I'm basically as Ashkenazi as you can get. You know, the results, what the results show is what really genetic studies show is that Ashkenazi Jews originate in the Levant, which is where Israel is located, in the Levantine Middle East on the shores of the Eastern Mediterranean. But my admixture results also shows a substantial Southern European component to my genome. I believe that also reflects genetic studies and also historical theories of Jewish migration and in the Mediterranean diaspora, also the Rhineland theory, which I've gone over before, which is the migration from Israel to Italy to the Rhineland fats, Rhineland Palatinate, and then I guess around probably in the Middle Ages and then early Middle Ages, and then around the 12th century, another migration east towards Central and Eastern Europe. But the genetic studies and historical theories, basically a lot of them put out that Jews mixed in antiquity with Greeks and Romans, or Greco-Romans, in the Hellenistic and Roman periods. So my ancestors are basically in the Levant since at least the Stone Age, or the Neo-Stone Age, or the New Stone Age, otherwise known as the Neolithic period, according to this new ancestry calculator by Tolan. So I'm just going to briefly go over the results, but you can see from the results again that Ashkenazi Jews, are mostly Levantine, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean, with nearly all of our Mediterranean admixture from Southern Europe, and nearly all that Southern Europe from Greece and Italy. Ashkenazi Jews generally plot either somewhere in the Ionian Sea between South Italy and the Peloponnese in southern Greece, or in the Mediterranean Sea between Sicily and Crete. So basically, again, we were Judeans who possibly mixed with Greco-Romans, either in the land of Israel or in the Mediterranean diaspora, or possibly later in northern Italy. Because, as I stated before, there were Italian Jews, Jewish families such as the Kalonimos family from Lucca, who migrated north to the Rhineland fats, Rhineland Palatinate in modern-day Germany, and helped develop, were instrumental in developing the Ashkenazi about 900 years ago. So could there possibly have been that mixing in northern Italy later, or was it earlier in Rome, or was it somewhere else in the Mediterranean diaspora, in Alexandria, in Greek-speaking Alexandria, Egypt, or in Greece itself, or possibly again in the land of Israel, where the Greeks and the Romans were in the land of Israel for a very long time. And Hellenism was very influential, even in influenced the Bible, Hebrew Bible itself, Hellenistic ideas. So now I'm just going to show you some of the screenshots, and I'm just going to bring this up on the computer here. So just bear with me. But I'm just going to show you just a few of the calculators, my results from the calculators. I won't spend too much time on this, but I just want to briefly go over it. Now, I've seen other results from Ashkenazi Jews, fully Ashkenazi Jews, and the one constant is a high amount of Levantine admixture. That's always a top population that I've seen for Ashkenazi Jews for these Tolan admixture calculators. Variation is basically the diaspora admixture. It varies. So some Ashkenazi Jews get more Southern European, some get more Western European, some get more Eastern European, some get more North African, some get more Iranian, an Assyrian, a Mesopotamian admixture, which I'm going to go into later in this video, could be from a mixing with Mizrahi Jews in Europe, which I'm going to get into next. But very briefly, and I'm going to put up the screenshots here, but my Tolan K16 Neolithic, which again is a Neo-Stone Age, is Levant Neolithic is the top, followed by Anatolian farmers, European Western hunter-gatherers, Caucasus, Iran Neolithic, etc. So it's, really you have to look at the top results. Anything around 1% or lower is probably just background noise. And then we have the Tolan K20 Bronze Age, which is, again, the top result from the Levant, Jordan Bronze Age. Jordan was Greater Israel. That's where the Judeans were living. That's where a lot of the Bible is from. The Hebrew Bible took place in what is now considered modern-day Jordan. And then we have Tolan recent ancestors Jews, again Levant at the top, but then very, very closely followed by South Italy or South Italia, and then North Italia, North Italy, which again, in my case, and not every Ashkenazi Jew is going to be similar, I obviously have some, Southern European admixture that is, from Greco-Roman, from the Greeks and Italians. And that's also reflected in Tolan K71, which compares 71 ancestral populations. And again, Levant's at the top, but then you have Crete, the Greek island of Crete. And then some Italian results, Apulia, Sicily, Lazio, and then Peloponnese in Greece. So Albania, Southeastern Europe, Tuscany, Arabia, some Spain, maybe perhaps some Sephardic ancestry there. So, okay, so that's the new DNA Genics, and please, post your results in the YouTube channel. I'd love to see what your results are. So now I just want to talk a little bit about possible my Mizrahi Jews early on in Europe in the medieval era. So and this hat tip goes to Quora contributor Eric Lowe for alerting me to the possibility that Mizrahi Jews, which Mizrahi are Jews who've always been in the Middle East. We're talking about Jews from Babylon, from the land of Israel, from Syria. And so they possibly joined the Ashkenazi very early in Europe. And I'm going to provide a link to follow Eric on Quora. Eric is very knowledgeable about the origins of Ashkenazi and other Jewish diaspora groups. Eric points to a couple articles that were turned into a book that discuss the split between Eastern Jewish diaspora of Babylon, Syria, and the land of Israel, who developed Rabbinic Judaism. And these were the Jews that came from the Babylonian, captivity. A lot of them, those were the Babylonian Jews. So they developed Rabbinic Judaism and the oral law. Now the Western Jewish diaspora, which is Ashkenazim, the North African Jews, Sephardic Jews, etc., Italian Jews, Romaniot of the Eastern Mediterranean. These Western diaspora Jews of the early medieval period in Europe, North Africa, again, etc. These Jews, again, like I stated earlier, they came from Greek-speaking Jews and later Latin-speaking Jews, who in Italy and France, who based their Judaism on the Bible, as translated to Greek in the Septuagint, or hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. But they had no concept. This theory puts out by these two authors that are cited that they had no concept of rabbinic literature, such as the Mishnah, Talmud, and Midrashim. So I'm just going to read a little passage from what Eric had to say about that, and I think this definitely merits further exploration. So basically, Eric is beginning to believe that there was possibly substantial migration of Babylonian Jews to early medieval Western Jewish populations in Europe and North Africa, which not only had religious influence, but also genetic influence. And the premise is from a couple of Israeli researchers. The last names are Mendeles and Ederai. And a summary of their work really quick, which was turned into a book in German, in the German language in 2010. The book that Mendeles wrote in conjunction with Aria Ederai, a professor of Jewish law at Tel Aviv University, and published in German by Vandenhoek and Ruprecht in Göttingen, Germany, argues that contrary to the accepted scholarly view, the rabbis in the first century of the Common Era did not have control over authority over the Western Greek-speaking and subsequently Latin-speaking Jewish diaspora. Neither the rabbis nor other people cared to translate the rabbinic corpus into Greek or Latin, perhaps from the simple reason that it was kept oral for centuries. Hence, the Jews in Asia Minor, Greece, the Aegean Islands, Italy, France, Spain, and Egypt, who were Greek-speaking, were almost completely cut off from rabbinic Judaism that functioned in the land of Israel and Babylonia because they had no common language of communication. As a result of this gap, two types of Jews were created: those who accepted rabbinic literature and all that it implies, and those in the West who remained biblical Jews without the oral law that developed in the East. Also, the Eastern Jews, i.e. in the land of Israel and eastward in the direction of Babylonia, who did not accept the rabbis, had the potential to accept them, because they knew Aramaic and Hebrew, in contrast to the Western Jews, who could practically could not communicate because they lacked the knowledge of these languages. Rabbinic literature, such as the Mishnah, the Talmud, and the Midrashim, penetrated into Western Europe only in the 8th and 9th centuries. At that point, the intensive familiarity of the Jews with this literature began. By that point, many of the Jews of Europe had been wiped out, and a not insignificant portion had converted to Christianity. But the remainder of Jews accepted the corpus, which was by then written down. And Eric says he ran a few models with the autosomal DNA and detected a small amounts of Iron Age Western Iranian admixture amongst most modern Western Jews. And so he says that these Iron Age Western Iranian samples are currently used as proxy for Mesopotamian autosomal DNA. And as we lack such samples, Mizrahi Jews have substantial such admixture, because just like the ancestors of Western Jews got Greco-Roman admixture, which again is reflected in my own admixture, as I stated earlier, those admixture calculators. They mixed with Babylonians and Assyrians in Mesopotamia. But to find 7 to 13% of such admixture in Western Jews is rather interesting, and point to possibly some admixture amongst some Mizrahi admixture among Western Jews. So, who were these Babylonian Jews? Well, and who were the Babylonian Jews that possibly taught the Talmud and possibly mixed with the Western diaspora Jews? Well, the Exilarch was the leader of the Jewish community in Babylon during the era of the Parthians, Sassanids, and Abbasids, up until the Mongol invasion of Baghdad in 1258, with intermittent gaps akin to political developments. That's a direct quote from the Wikipedia page on Babylonian Exilarchs. So if Mizrahi Exilarchs from Babylon, Judea, and Syria journeyed to Central and Eastern Europe in the 9th to 12th century CE to teach the Ashkenazi Jews the Talmud and Rabbinic Judaism, the question becomes how many? And was there mixing between the Ashkenazi Jews and these Mizrahi Jews in Europe? I think Eric possibly answers that with the look at Ashkenazi, not all, but some Ashkenazi genetics that have some Mesopotamian admixture there. And so, but a possible hint also is taken from an article on the Babylonian Exilarchs, and I'm going to do a direct quote here. The Aramaic prayer, Yakun Perkan, formerly recited in Babylonia while blessing the Exilarchs and other community leaders, is still recited in most Ashkenazi synagogues. And now I'm going to end the video with not the Babylonian Exilarchs, the religious authorities that possibly taught some of the Western Jews the Talmud, but some traders and merchants who possibly settled in Europe or very early on from the Middle East. So I'm going to just read these passages really quick, and that'll be the end of the video. And these are taken from a couple books. That I got through a quick Google search. And so I'm just going to read directly. After an interruption of over 150 years, we encounter another group of Jewish merchants, new arrivals from the great centers of Jewish civilization in Palestine and Babylon. They were attracted to Europe not only in the profit to be made in distant lands, but by the policy of protection offered by the Carolingian kings, who wished to encourage and control the suppliers of expensive textiles, spices, and other luxury articles consumed by the rich nobility. Okay, I'm going to keep reading here. In the 9th century, some of these merchants were involved in long-distance trade encompassing the whole of Eurasia. From the Frankish kingdom, they exported swords, slaves, and furs to the Muslim world. Then, following the Silk Road to India and China, and returning via Khazaria and the Slavic lands, they brought back spices and perfumes to Europe. A Muslim document refers to these great dealers as Radaniya, or the Radanites, from the River Rhone or region of Baghdad. You'll be familiar with this, I talked about this, the Radanites, in a previous video. From several sources, we learn of the existence of a community of prosperous Jewish merchants protected by imperial agents who enjoyed the social prestige which the Christian society was willing to accord to the descendants of the people of the Bible. When Agobard, the Archbishop of Lyons, conducted an intensive campaign against the Jews, his efforts to restrict their activities all failed. It was only after the Carolingian period, however, that the Jewry destined to be known as Ashkenazi was formed and began to evolve its unique patterns of internal organization and cultural life. Large families, often led by rabbinical scholars, migrated from southern Europe, particularly from Italy, to establish communities in the Paris Basin and the regions of Champagne and the Rhine. Quite small at first, these communities began to grow rapidly during the 11th century. From about 400 persons around the turn of the millennium, the number of Jews in German lands had reached almost 20,000 by the time of the First Crusades at the end of the 11th century. These new communities also dealt in long-distance trade. The first-generation immigrants recognized hereditary monopoly rights in relations with clients, a custom borrowed from Arabic-speaking communities such as that of the Karun, and still practiced among Ashkenazi Jews as late as the 7th century. Etc., etc. Okay, and then there's one more passage I'm going to read, and then that'll be the end of the video. The history of the beginnings of a Jewish presence in Europe cannot be thought of as a linear and continuous development. The evidence is fragmentary, random, and often inconsistent. The earliest recorded presence of Jews in medieval Europe is that of colonies of Oriental or Syrian merchants in towns north of the Loire, L-O-I-R-E, or in southern Gaul during the 5th and 6th centuries. In the historians' debate concerning the demarcation of periods, the existence of these colonies attests to the persistence of trade in the period of transition from the urban and Mediterranean world of late antiquity to the Middle Ages. It also indicates the contraction of commerce, which was then limited solely to the import of luxury goods and carried almost exclusively by non-indigenous groups who inherited the role of the Greek-speaking diaspora. Okay, I'm just going to read one more passage really quick. Like the figure of Charlemagne himself, the origins of Ashkenazi Jewry are obscured by legend. Jews had settled along the Rhine in Roman times, but the impetus for the development of Talmudic scholarship among Western European Jewry came with the arrival in Germany of the Kalonymos family, probably sometime in the 9th century. Jewish tradition ascribes this migration to Charlemagne's call to the learned rabbi Kalonymos of Lucca, Italy, to come to Mainz. So that leaves a question mark there, that last passage. Did the Ashkenazi Jews in the Rhineland learn the Talmud, the oral law, from the Kalonymos family, from these Italian Jewish families, these learned rabbis that came from Italy? Or was it the Mizrahi Jews from the Babylonian exilarchs, the Babylonian and Syrian and Judean Jews from the land of Israel, or was it a combination of both? That question is very much still to be answered. And thank you for watching the video.